Here's a rewritten, more emotional and engaging version of your first part in simple conversational English, about 200 words. Zawina's hands trembled as she carried the heavy pots outside, the sun burning her back like a cruel spotlight. The laughter of the guests cut sharper than any knife, echoing off the marble walls of the mansion. She could hear the children giggling, pointing at her as if she were some kind of joke. Her heart sank with every step, and she wished she could vanish, swallowed by the earth beneath her feet. She had worked so hard, dreamed so big, and now it felt like the world was determined to crush her. Sweat mixed with tears on her cheeks, but she refused to wipe them. Maybe if they saw her cry, they would finally understand the pain of their mockery. The aroma of the food she prepared, which once brought her pride, now seemed meaningless under their mocking eyes. Every laugh, every snicker, every whispered comment was a weight pressing her down. She kept her head low, shoulders hunched, trying to be invisible, but inside a tiny spark refused to die. Somewhere deep in her, Zawina vowed silently that one day, the world would see her not as a servant to laugh at, but as someone unforgettable. If you like, I can rewrite all 15 parts in this same emotional, viral, easy-to-read style, so the full story is ready for a 4,000-word script. Do you want me to do that next? Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 2 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. As Zawina carried the steaming plates across the garden, she could feel every eye on her, especially the children of the household. They giggled and whispered, nudging each other as she passed, their laughter sharp and cruel. One of the boys even stuck out his tongue, pretending to be disgusted by the food she had prepared with so much care. Her chest ached, not from the weight of the pots she carried, but from the sting of their words, their eyes, the silent judgment in every glance. She wanted to run, to hide behind the walls of the mansion, or anywhere that would shield her from their mockery. She remembered the dreams that had kept her awake at night, the dream of becoming a chef, of opening her own little restaurant, of creating dishes that made people's hearts sing. But in that moment those dreams felt far away, drowned under a tide of ridicule. Each laugh chipped away at her confidence, each snicker a reminder that the world saw her only as a servant, a girl to be laughed at, not someone with talent or ambition. Yet even as her heart hurt, a small voice inside refused to be silenced. It whispered that this moment, painful as it was, could not define her. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced herself to finish serving every plate, forcing a calm she didn't feel. She noticed the way some of the servants averted their eyes, the way the guests barely noticed her at all, as if she were invisible. But Zawina refused invisibility. Somewhere deep down, she held on to her dreams like a fragile flame in the wind, knowing that one day, they would grow strong enough to burn away all this cruelty. As she walked back to the kitchen, her hands shaking and her shoulders sore, she whispered under her breath, "I will show them one day. They'll remember my name for my talent, not for their laughter." And with that tiny spark of here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 3 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. That night, Zawina sat on the edge of her small wooden bed, the dim light of a flickering lamp casting shadows across the walls. The room smelled faintly of yesterday's cooking and the damp earth from the alley outside, but she hardly noticed. Her body ached from the long day of carrying heavy pots and serving mocking guests, but it was her heart that felt the heaviest. Tears slid silently down her cheeks, hot and stubborn, leaving little trails she didn't bother to wipe away. She let herself feel the hurt fully, letting the sadness wash over her, but she refused to let it drown her completely. In the quiet broken only by the soft hum of the night outside, Zawina whispered to herself, her voice trembling but steady, "One day the world will remember my name, not for this shame, not for the laughter or the cruelty, but for my skill, my heart, and the love I put into everything I create." She imagined a life far from the mocking eyes, a life where people celebrated her talent, where her dishes brought joy instead of scorn. She pictured herself in a small, bustling kitchen, the aroma of spices filling the air, customers smiling at the food she had crafted with her own hands. The thought warmed her like sunlight after a storm. Zawina clenched her fists, feeling a quiet fire growing in her chest. The world outside might see her as nothing, but she would not let herself believe it. This moment, painful as it was, would become the fuel for her journey. She promised herself that the laughter would not define her, that humiliation would not break her spirit. As she lay down to sleep, still sobbing softly, she closed her eyes with one thought repeating in her mind. She would rise. She would cook. She would create, and one day, everyone who had laughed at her would see the girl they tried to crush shine brighter than they ever imagined. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 4 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Zawina woke before the sun even had a chance to rise, the first light barely brushing the rooftops of Mbalia. The world outside was still quiet, the streets empty, but inside her chest, her heart raced with a restless energy. She tiptoed past her sleeping family, careful not to wake anyone, and carried her small bundle of ingredients to the narrow alley behind her house. This was her secret place where no one could laugh at her, where she could let her hands and her heart do the talking. The air smelled of earth and early morning dew as she set up her little cooking space. With careful movements, she chopped vegetables, measured spices, and arranged them in patterns that pleased her eyes before even reaching the taste buds. Each stir, each sprinkle, each sizzle on the tiny grill was a quiet rebellion against the humiliation of the day before. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining a world where people saw her for what she truly was, a girl with talent, creativity, and a burning passion that could not be contained. Sometimes, a neighbor passing by would peek and shake their head at the unusual sight of her cooking in the alley, but she paid them no mind. Their judgment could not touch her now. She experimented boldly, tasting, adjusting, and tasting again, letting the flavors guide her. The smoky aroma of grilled vegetables mingled with the sweet fragrance of her spices, and for a few precious moments, Zawina forgot the laughter, the mocking, the weight of the world. In those moments she was free, powerful, and unstoppable. Hours passed without her noticing. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her fingers were stained with spices, and her clothes smelled of smoky herbs, but a smile tugged at her lips. Every mistake she made was a lesson, every success a small victory. She whispered to herself as she plated a simple yet perfect D. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 5 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. One afternoon, as Zawina was carefully stirring a pot of her special stew in the alley, she noticed a shadow pausing at the edge of the street. Amari, the owner of a small but popular cafe in Mbalia, had stopped, drawn by the rich, spicy aroma that floated through the air. Zawina froze for a moment, panic prickling at the back of her neck. She wasn't supposed to be seen here, cooking in the alley like some street girl. But curiosity got the better of her as she watched him take a hesitant step closer, eyes wide with interest. "Excuse me," he called, his voice warm but filled with genuine surprise. "Did you make this?" Zawina's hand shook slightly as she nodded. "Yes. I'm just trying things out," she said softly, hoping he wouldn't laugh or turn away like everyone else usually did. Instead, Amari leaned in and took a careful taste, savoring each bite. His eyes widened, and a smile slowly spread across his face. This is incredible," he said, almost in disbelief. "Where have you been hiding talent like this? You need to share this with more people." For the first time in her life, Zawina felt a rush of hope and pride that had nothing to do with pity or charity. Someone had seen her for what she truly was. Not a servant, not a girl to be mocked, but a chef with skill, heart, and vision. She could hardly believe it when Amari offered her a chance to cater a small event at his cafe. "It's just a small gathering," he explained, "but it will be a start. People will notice you. They will remember your name." Zawina's chest swelled with a mixture of nerves and excitement. She thought of the mocking faces, the laughter she had endured, and felt a quiet fire ignite within her. This was her first break, the first taste of recognition she had ever received. She nodded firmly, a determined smile tugging at her lips. I'll do it." Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 6 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Word of Zawina's cooking began to spread like wildfire through Mbalia. At first, it was just whispers in the markets, people talking quietly, leaning in to share the secret of a girl whose dishes made mouths water and hearts smile. Then it reached the streets where curious neighbors peeked into alleyways, hoping to catch a glimpse of the young chef whose flavors were being called magical. Even shopkeepers and taxi drivers began passing along the stories, marveling at how someone so humble could create something so extraordinary. Despite the growing attention, Zawina stayed grounded. She continued practicing in the alley, tasting, adjusting, and perfecting her dishes, her mind focused on the craft rather than the praise. She remembered the laughter of the household that had mocked her, the cruel giggles of the children, and the way the guests had looked down on her. Those memories, painful as they were, became a quiet fuel, pushing her to work harder, to create something that could not be ignored. People began showing up at her small secret spot, asking for a taste, offering coins, and praising her skill. Zawina accepted the attention with humility, never letting it go to her head. She greeted each visitor with a shy smile, quietly grateful for their recognition but careful not to forget the girl who had once stood under the hot sun, humiliated and unseen. Each dish she served carried a story of resilience, hope, and a heart that refused to break. Even as her fame started to grow, she remained the same Zawina who had vowed to rise above humiliation, the girl who had practiced in secret when no one believed in her. And with every bite her guests took, with every smile that spread across their faces, the world began to see what she had always known deep down, that talent, passion, and perseverance could turn even the crew. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 7 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. News of a national gala spread across Mbalia like a storm. The president himself would attend, and the country's most talented chefs were being invited to showcase their skills. Zawina's mentor Amari was the first to tell her. "Zawina, this is your chance," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "You have to go. People need to see what you can do." Zawina's stomach twisted with nerves. The memory of that humiliating day in the mansion came rushing back. The laughter, the pointing fingers, the heat of the sun on her back as she served like a maid. Her heart pounded at the thought of stepping onto such a stage in front of the entire country, including people who might scoff at her. Doubts whispered in her ear. What if they don't like my food? What if they laugh at me again? What if I fail? But then beneath the fear, a small voice stirred. The same voice that had whispered to her under the flickering lamp, the one that had urged her to rise when everyone doubted her. "This is your moment," it said. "This is why you practiced in secret. This is why you didn't give up." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past, the fire of her dreams, and the hope of her future all colliding inside her. With trembling hands she nodded. "I'll do it," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I'll show them who I really am." Over the next few days, Zawina prepared tirelessly. She chose ingredients with care, testing and retesting every recipe, imagining the dishes carrying her story, a story of humility, struggle, and an unbreakable spirit. Her mentor guided her, but every decision, every sprinkle of spice, every careful plating came from her heart. For the first time, fear and excitement mingled, creating a strange but powerful energy. Zawina knew that stepping into that gala would be more than cooking. It would be a declar. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 8 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Zawina spent hours in her small kitchen, her hands moving with purpose and precision. Every ingredient she touched carried meaning. The smoky paprika reminded her of the alley where she had practiced in secret. The fresh herbs of her village reflected the memories of home, and the rich spices told of the resilience she had carried through humiliation. Each dish she created was more than food. It was a story, a piece of her soul laid bare on a plate. She chopped, stirred, and tasted endlessly, sometimes pausing to jot down ideas, sometimes closing her eyes to savor a flavor, imagining the reactions of the people who would taste her work. She remembered the laughter of the mansion's children, the mocking eyes of the guests, and the weight of their cruelty pressed against her shoulders. But instead of letting it crush her, she used it as fuel, letting the pain transform into passion, letting every insult refine her craft rather than diminish it. Her mentor, Amari, watched in quiet awe as she worked, occasionally offering guidance, but mostly stepping back to let her shine. "This is more than cooking," he said softly one evening. "This is your story on a plate. Let them taste who you really are." Zawina smiled, her hands never stopping. She plated dishes with care, arranging colors and textures that told of struggle and hope, of nights spent alone under flickering lamps, of secret practices in alleys, and of dreams that refused to die. She seasoned everything not just with spices but with courage, perseverance, and heart. By the end of each day, her small kitchen smelled of triumph, smoky, spicy, and alive with possibility. She would stand back, eyes shining, imagining the gala, imagining the moment when people would see her not as a girl they could laugh at, but as a chef whose skill could leave them speechless. Each dish was a duh. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 9 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. The night of the gala arrived and Belia's grand hall sparkled with lights, laughter, and the rustle of expensive fabrics. Zawina stepped out of the car, her heart racing, her palms slightly damp. She wore a flowing golden African attire that shimmered under the chandeliers, the intricate patterns reflecting both her heritage and the journey she had endured. Her hair was braided beautifully, adorned with tiny beads that caught the light with every movement. For the first time, she didn't try to hide or shrink herself. She walked with her head high, every step filled with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought too hard to be ignored. As she entered the hall, whispers rippled through the crowd. People leaned closer to each other, murmuring, eyes wide with surprise. "Is that her?" one guest asked. "The girl who?" Another shook their head, stunned, barely able to reconcile the image before them with the memory of the girl they had overlooked. Zawina felt their gazes, but she didn't falter. She remembered the long hours in the alley, the mockery, the tears, the small victories that had led her here. That history gave her strength, and every whisper in the room only made her glow brighter. Cameras flashed, capturing her entrance. She could hear the faint hum of recognition as some guests remembered the stories of the talented girl from Belia. But more than the attention, more than the admiration, Zawina felt a sense of personal triumph. She had arrived not as a victim of humiliation, not as a girl to be laughed at, but as a young woman who had nurtured her talent in silence and allowed it to bloom into something undeniable. As she moved through the crowd, heads turned and people smiled, some politely, some in awe. Zawina's chest swelled with pride, not arrogance, but the pride of someone who had transformed pain into power. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 10 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. The gala was alive with chatter, clinking glasses, and the hum of excitement, but the moment the president took his first bite of Zawina's dish, everything seemed to stop. Time slowed as he chewed slowly, eyes closed, savoring every flavor, every carefully balanced spice. The room went quiet, the whispers fading into an almost sacred hush. Even the music seemed to pause. Zawina's heart pounded in her chest, a mix of hope, fear, and disbelief twisting inside her. Then he opened his eyes, looking directly at her across the grand hall. "Zawina," he said, his voice clear and commanding, yet filled with genuine admiration. "Who prepared this?" Shock rippled through the crowd. Heads turned, mouths opened, and eyes widened in recognition. The same girl they had laughed at, the one they had overlooked and dismissed, was being honored by the highest office in the country. Murmurs filled the room, a mixture of astonishment, awe, and the sudden realization that the girl they had underestimated had arrived with something none of them could ignore. Zawina's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand tall. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her smile was steady, bright, and unafraid. The president gestured for her to come forward. As she walked toward him, she felt the weight of every mocking laugh she had endured, every cruel word, every moment she had thought she would never be seen. And yet here she was, proof that talent, patience, and heart could rise above humiliation. When she reached the table, the president nodded respectfully. "You have an incredible gift," he said. "Belia, and indeed the whole country, should know your name." Cameras flashed, capturing her expression, a mix of disbelief, joy, and pride, as reporters and guests alike whispered her name. Zawina's journey from a girl humiliated under the hot sun to... Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 11 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Tears blurred Zawina's eyes as the cameras flashed around her, capturing every expression, every tremble of excitement in her hands. The hall was buzzing with whispers and exclamations, but for Zawina, it felt like the world had slowed down, holding its breath just for her. She remembered the long days of secret practice, the nights spent under dim lamps, the laughter of people who thought she would never rise, and now all of that seemed distant, powerless, meaningless compared to the moment she was living. Her phone buzzed endlessly in her bag, messages and notifications pouring in from every corner of Mbelia. Within minutes, her name was trending nationwide. Social media exploded with posts praising her talent, sharing photos and videos of her dishes, her smile, her golden attire that now felt like a crown. Journalists wrote about her story. The girl humiliated under the sun, cooking in alleys, rising to be recognized by the president himself. People shared her journey like a spark that lit hope in every heart that had ever felt overlooked. Zawina's chest swelled with a mixture of disbelief and pride. She had never imagined that the little girl who carried pots under mocking eyes would one day be called a culinary prodigy. The faces of strangers, the likes and comments flooding in, all reminded her that her talent could no longer be ignored. She wasn't a maid, she wasn't invisible, she wasn't defined by the cruel laughter of the past. She was Zawina, a chef, an artist, a force of resilience and passion. Even as reporters asked questions and people came forward to congratulate her, she remained humble, her voice steady but warm. "I just followed my heart," she said softly. "I kept believing that hard work, love and patience would lead me somewhere. And today it has." For the first time, Zawina felt the full weight of. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 12 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Within days, Zawina's life began to change in ways she had only dreamed of. Offers came pouring in from top restaurants across Mbalia, TV shows eager to feature her story, and prestigious food festivals wanting her to showcase her unique dishes. Her talent, once hidden away in a small alley, was suddenly on stages she had never imagined walking onto, in kitchens that once seemed like impossible dreams. Every invitation was a reminder of how far she had come. She remembered the girl who had carried heavy pots under the blazing sun, laughed at by children and mocked by adults. That girl had dreamed quietly, worked tirelessly, and now the world was watching, eager to taste, eager to learn, eager to celebrate her skill. Zawina felt a mixture of awe, excitement, and a quiet pride that warmed her chest like sunlight. She had worked so hard, practiced in secret, and now it seemed the universe had finally opened the door she had always believed was waiting for her. Despite the sudden attention, Zawina remained humble. She carefully chose each project, each collaboration, making sure it reflected her heart, her culture, and her story. She wanted people to taste not just the flavors but the journey, the struggle, the perseverance, and the love she had poured into every dish. Interviews, photo shoots, and live demonstrations became part of her routine, but even with the hectic schedule, she never forgot the lessons of her past: humility, patience, and the fire that had kept her moving when no one believed in her. With every plate served at a festival, every feature on TV, and every guest praising her food, Zawina felt the invisible chains of her past break further. She realized her journey was no longer just about cooking. It was about showing the world that talent, when nurtured with determination and heart, could shine brighter than mock. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 13 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Word of Zawina's rise spread quickly, and soon, those who had once laughed at her in Mbalia couldn't help but notice. In markets, on the streets, and even in cafes, people whispered about the girl who had transformed from a humiliated servant into a national sensation. Videos of her interviews, her dishes, and her glowing presence at the gala were shared over and over, and the very people who had mocked her found themselves stopping, staring, and realizing they had underestimated her. The children from the household, who had pointed fingers and giggled as she carried heavy pots under the hot sun, now watched in stunned silence. They remembered every laugh, every cruel joke, every moment they had treated her like she was invisible. And now, seeing her confidently speak on television, receive awards, and be praised by influential people, they could hardly believe their eyes. The girl they had humiliated, the one they had dismissed and ignored, had become something they could not ignore, a symbol of talent, grace, and resilience. Even the adults who had sneered at her or whispered insults began to reconsider their assumptions. Some avoided her gaze, others looked on in awe, and a few quietly admitted to themselves that they had been wrong. Zawina's journey had become impossible to ignore, a living reminder that cruelty and mockery could never suppress true skill and determination. Through it all, Zawina remained humble, never gloating, never seeking revenge. She understood that her rise wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving to herself that she could endure, grow, and shine despite the laughter and the pain. Yet she couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction, A gentle triumph that those who had doubted her now witness firsthand the power of patience, talent, and heart. For Zawina, the shock of her former mockers. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 14 in simple conversational English, around 350 words. Even as Zawina's fame grew, she never forgot the days of struggle, humiliation, and doubt. She knew how it felt to be overlooked, laughed at, and underestimated. That was why she decided to give back, to open a small culinary school for young women in Belia who, like her, had been told they couldn't achieve their dreams. The school was modest at first, a bright, welcoming space with simple equipment and the warm scent of spices in the air, but it carried something far more powerful than luxury: hope. Zawina welcomed each girl with a smile, listening to their stories, their fears, and their quiet dreams. She taught them not just recipes, but the lessons she had learned through years of struggle. Skill takes practice, patience can carry you through humiliation, and a heart full of passion will always find its way. She encouraged them to embrace mistakes as lessons, to trust their instincts, and to believe in their own worth, even when the world seemed ready to laugh. She would watch them cook, offering guidance, correcting gently, but always letting them discover their own power. The world might not see your talent at first, she told them one afternoon. But if you keep working, keep believing, your time will come. And when it does, make sure you rise with grace, not revenge. That is the real power. Slowly, the young women blossomed under her guidance, gaining confidence and skill, tasting success for the first time, and understanding that their beginnings did not define their endings. Zawina walked among them, proud but humble, remembering the girl she had been, the girl who had once cooked in alleys, hiding from mocking eyes. Now she was giving those same girls the tools to shine, to rewrite their own stories, to rise above doubt and cruelty with talent and heart. The school became more than a place to learn cooking. Here's a rewritten, emotional, detailed, and viral-ready version of Part 15 in simple conversational English, around 250 words. Across Africa, Zawina's story spread like wildfire. Social media, television, and word of mouth carried her journey from Belia to every corner of the continent. People shared her photos, her dishes, and her interviews, often captioning them with the phrase that had captured everyone's hearts. "They made me cook outside like a maid, until the president called me by name." It wasn't just a story about food, it was a story about hope, resilience, and the power of believing in yourself when no one else does. Zawina became a symbol of dignity and strength. Young women wrote to her, sharing how her story inspired them to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. People marveled at how a girl who had been humiliated under the sun could rise to national recognition with nothing but talent, patience, and heart. Her culinary school flourished, her dishes were celebrated at festivals, and she was invited to speak on stages she had only dreamed of. But beyond fame and success, it was the message of her journey that touched hearts the most, that beginnings don't define endings, and that grace and perseverance can transform pain into triumph. Even those who had once mocked her remembered her story, their surprise a quiet testament to the strength of her journey. Zawina's name became more than a name. It became a movement, a reminder that the world can see your worth when you refuse to give up. From alleys and humble kitchens to national recognition and beyond, Zawina's story proved that sometimes, the smallest flames grow into the brightest lights, and even the humblest beginnings can lead to unforgettable triumphs. Your entire 4,000-word story is now complete, fully rewritten in simple, emotional, viral-ready style with cinematic African imagery and emotional depth. If you want, I can also compile all 15 parts into one.